So thank you very much for joining us. We're just going to sort of really chat through how CRG have helped Abba and his team at Charles Russell Speechley using network assurance. Now, IP Fabric's definition, I suppose, of network assurance is all about really, I suppose, understanding what matters in the network. You know, we traditionally, as network engineers, been busy looking at our tooling, our monitoring platforms and the like, which are great for this, but they only give us a certain amount of information. So we go to documentation, right? We have Visio diagrams and spreadsheets and design documents and the like. But again, very manual, it's out of date as soon as we make a change to them. So we end up typically going on the devices themselves, and here's our network automation journey for those of you who started down that path. We don't want to use the command line anymore. We don't want to manually have to go and check on data and information, because ultimately what that ends up with is some poor person having to sit and make sense of it all. We've all done it. We've all sat and puzzled for hours over that data, over that documentation to try and make sense of what's in the network. It's the old way of doing things, right? We end up having tooling that means that we're looking at the network device by device, looking at every single configuration, every single piece of state. We're having to worry about vendor-specific tooling and often technology focus. So being Cisco customers, I'm sure that you guys are looking at your data center infrastructure using APIC for ACI, or you're looking at your SD-WAN with vManage, but you don't have a way of looking at it as a whole. Unless, of course, you're using do-it-yourself tooling, open source tooling, building your own automation platforms. But IP Fabric, we believe that's fine to a point, but in reality, you don't want to be doing this yourself. You don't want to be building your own solutions. You want to be able to find a different way, and that's to use network assurance. This is all about getting rid of those archaic methods that can only tell us part of the story. And this is what CRG have implemented for Charles Russell Speechley. So this is why we wanted really to introduce these guys today, because they can tell the story probably as well as, if not better, than we can. Now, if you do want to find out a little bit more about how IP Fabric does its thing, we do have a breakout session tomorrow. You're welcome to join us. I think there are still spaces, so please do look in your schedule. But I wanted to introduce first Abba, who sat with me here. He works obviously for Charles Russell Speechley, and it can give you a bit more understanding, I suppose, of really the challenges, I suppose, Abba, that you faced when you engaged CRG.
Thank you, Daren. I think we've got limited time. I could talk tomorrow with all the challenges that we've all got across our organisations. But essentially, there are three areas where, there are three areas across our organisation, I see as a department, where challenges like compliance, as a legal firm in the legal market, obviously cybersecurity is a big one. Keeping your code up to date is sorry, my voice got it's all good. Cough. Keeping your code up to date is obviously hard to maintain. We've been working with legacy providers over the years where we offload some of our network maintenance to external teams because our team is small. Our tech is obviously big, and I'm sure many of you have got complicated environments yourselves. And one of the key challenges is maintaining it all. Giving context around some of the alerting that we have. We all have monitoring tools. We all have network engineers that could monitor our networks and our equipment. But then how do you put context around what we're seeing on the network? And again, going into the world of data, going into the world of AI, going into providing the tools and services, the digital workspace for our users around some of the tools they use, we need to provide a stable network. That stable network doesn't come easily. It's hard to maintain. It's becoming more complicated, even though to the end user, what they see is a laptop with lots of software that they utilize every day. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of maintenance and lots of infrastructure that goes into it. So how do we get around that? Well, apart from building a really big, large team that can maintain it all, we need to implement something, a service, which CRG first approached us with, was around providing a tool set, a tool capability where rather than have multiple engineers that could be monitoring your network, understanding the alerting, understanding the performance and doing something about it, but actually having a dynamic tool that can actually envisage what the kind of problems that you're going to face and actually look at your network as a whole from an assurance perspective. Is your code up to date? Are there any performance issues? Identifying those. And of course, and I'm sure there's a few engineers in the audience today, I've struggled over the years to find engineers that like documentation. I'm sure many of you have struggled yourselves, but essentially documentation when it comes to large complicated networks is very hard to upkeep. Yeah. And so we have never found a tool like this, a service like this provided by CRG, where the documentation capability is so dynamic. At any point, at any time, we can create a network topology of our current network with all our interlinks, with all of our connections, going across our Cisco estate, but into our other vendor estate, and we can work out exactly what's going on. So the main key challenge there for us was visibility, making sure that we're getting best use out of the engineers that we do have, and of course compliance is a big piece to that.
No, that's great stuff. And I suppose, Campbell, once you were engaged to move things along, how did you approach it, and what did you look for in terms of service improvements that you could bring?
So I think, as a smaller business compared to the larger providers, and with CRS having a number of 24/7 managed service providers and things like that, we had to try and find a way to differentiate ourselves. And I think that's where we're leading with IP Fabric as a tool set, and how we are leading with tools has enabled us to show value quite quickly. Because as a smaller partner, you kind of get ruled out immediately as soon as you show up. They've got 3 CCIEs, at the much bigger providers, but the traditional way in which network audits and discovery and providing that level of assurance was done was extremely expensive. By the time the audit was done and the documentation was created and you've presented it to senior management, it's all changed. Yeah. So I think one of the key aspects of leading with IP Fabric is it gave us a way to differentiate, it gave us a way to show value immediately, and also from a third-party point of view, we're not marking our own homework, so those assurance checks immediately give us something to talk about, and they're all based off common SSH commands. It's all things we all know and understand. So I think that enabled us to quite quickly report back into CRS's senior management to say, these are all the things that we have discovered in terms of your network, which is on a 24/7 managed service, which is in the hands of service providers, but the service providers don't necessarily always have your best interests at heart. So I think that's quite quickly we've been able to mark other homework and show value immediately. And those intent checks and things like that to create a report in less than a day, I haven't seen many other tools that can be deployed so quickly.
I suppose for me as an ex-network consultant myself, I've spent many a happy hour, as I'm sure many of the people here have, with pen and paper, drawing maps of networks and trying to transfer that into documentation. For me, documentation is dead, right? It's a complete waste of time for the reasons you pointed out. And I think that's one of the things that I like to think of with IP Fabric, is that it's a different approach, right? You're building a database of the network, and it just so happens that one of the outputs from that database is documentation that you can trust. But in reality, you don't treat it as documentation, right? It's much more than that.
Yeah, and I think they are genuinely technical challenges, because I think a lot of the time, you're getting approached with product, and the products are there to solve your solutions. Like, we can even talk about ThousandEyes and things like that, where, again, you have to deploy ThousandEyes to see the value. You've got to do all those things. So leading with a tool set that we can provide the documentation extremely quickly, vendor agnostic, highlighting the key Cisco infrastructure that they had, we were able to report back on things like spanning tree issues. The real the devil's in the detail. And I think the diagramming and documentation was one thing, but to come back and say to ABBA and to say to the senior management, we can fix your spanning tree, we can fix all the things that do actually keep you up at night that are causing issues, it was, again, a slightly different approach to buy a new network and all your problems will go away, because we also know in the migration, they're just going to take the old configuration and throw it on the new kit, because people aren't really interested in fixing your problems.
So you propagate the old problems to the new.
Exactly.
Because you've not got that grasp, I suppose the other thing I was thinking that as well as using the product interactively, this network assurance is a bigger topic. It's not just about having a tool you can do stuff with, but it's about providing data and validation to people who are interested in that with a bigger picture in mind, I suppose. So how have you approached that to look at reporting and that kind of thing?
So I think one of the best features within the IP Fabric platform is the open API, is the Python SDK. The standard reporting that you get out of the platform goes into a Word document. It's quite vanilla, but when you actually start working with the API and you start seeing the capabilities of that platform, you can create very custom reports, and that could be for security and compliance reasons. It could be for various network assurance tasks, but it's a database that the more you use it, the more you query it, the more information it's going to give you. And there's only so much information, IP Fabric can put on a GUI, on a dashboard, but the key is the information that sits in that database, and we're able to call it and get the right information and present to the right people as well. So, to ABBA's, to senior management, they might not be as interested in some of the lower level details, but in terms of audit and compliance and reporting, and some of the bigger tasks, a lot of organizations are trying to go through things like ISO, SOC 2, things like that. Having the tool that provides you reports, every day, however you set your snapshots up, is a great advantage. So we've been able to capitalize on that and not only lead with technical problems, but audit and compliance is the top of most people's agenda. So you're coming in with a different approach. And I think that's where it's a tool that provides us as a consultancy to give a lot more value quickly.
Yeah. And ABBA, have you found that now you have the data, you're able to not just fix the problems faster, but also report on it better? Is that fair?
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I don't delve into the system myself. I'm not that technical anymore, unfortunately. But essentially, even from just a central management perspective, just understanding the condition of our network itself, seeing an overview report on the status of our network is very beneficial for me. But increasingly for the network teams that are involved in the security teams, we can potentially iron out where there are potential issues. So it's hugely important. Over the years we've seen advancements in WAN technology, SD-WAN, and there's been a level of automation, but it sounds simple.
Yeah.
The service sounds simple, but it's very, very effective, and I'm surprised that we haven't been there before.
It's interesting because obviously we have all of those different technologies and we have all of those different automation platforms for all of those different areas of the network, but it's all about bringing that together, I suppose, and having that overall understanding of what's in the network.
Yeah, exactly. So we've had monitoring solutions over the years, data center monitoring solutions, network monitoring solutions, but they don't give you context behind the actual, if there is a potential issue, what is the actual problem? And understanding that, using that data, and because it's so data rich, you can automate tasks on the back of that. So again, it's modernizing what a internal network looks like and modernizing how we fix problems going forward. Sounds simple, but something that we've never had before.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Go on, Campbell.
Yeah, I was just going to say, building on that, I think a lot of people, or we've found everyone has a big appetite for automation, but people don't realize how hard it is to achieve automation until you've standardized and fixed all the problems you've got. So I think one of the key things, for us in IP Fabric and providing that level of assurance, it gets us, as an organization to the point where we're also confident to automate, because, I don't want any of our automation engineers going out and destroying customer networks until we have the confidence that the client's network is also in a place to be automated. So I think, that's where, for us and for Charles Russell Speechley's, it gives everyone a little bit of confidence to go and say the network is at a a level of assurance that we are confident to go and start making bigger and better changes. And in getting to that, you've really got to fix the boring stuff. But it is, the little things that are going to trip you up as you start that automation journey. So, and again, sometimes people don't find that to be the most big transformation projects, but they're the things that are going to stop your transformation project.
Right.
So yeah, we've just found that to be extremely helpful.
Yeah, and I guess that's where the growth for the future comes from, right? You've got to start with a foundation, and you've got to build from there. So I guess that's something that you're both thinking about for the future of Charles Russell Speechley's network, I guess, right, Abba?
Correct. I mean, since obviously COVID sounds like a distant history now, but since COVID, the way we work, where we work, that's changed. Our network designs have changed. We've moved internet security to the edge, and so maintaining those networks, complicated networks. Even though the user still has that same experience, they can work from anywhere, they have a device that they can work from. Behind the scenes, it's a complicated area of networks that you need to maintain. And for us, there's lots of use cases where this is added value. We as an organization have restructured our internal office networks, and we're going towards a Wi-Fi only connected office. And again, so making sure that we have that visibility of the condition of our network is hugely important.
That's great stuff. And Campbell, any other thoughts on where you go from here?
It largely depends on Abba's appetite to go from there. But no, I think in terms of the roadmap at the moment is the focus is on the assurance piece. I think that's going to set the base to start the orchestration piece later on. So I think in the short term, we've got the automation appetite and the orchestration side of things is coming into play. But 12 months from now, the organization will be in a much better place to start bigger orchestration activities. And I think also one of the big things around automation and things like that is it's not only for the big enterprises. The medium, mid-size organizations really struggle with it. They don't know where to get started. So I think that's big part of the partnership is leaving customers better off. We don't look to outsource managed services or anything like that. If anything, we want to bring the tool sets back in-house so you can take control of your network again using automation. So we've seen some of the challenges where you've outsourced your SD-WAN or you've going down the SASE route, and what used to be a quick firewall rule change is now weeks, if not months, of product team discussions, and that's not available, and it's really frustrating. But I think if we can leave Charles Russell Speechley's in a place where they've got the tool sets to take on that responsibility back, hopefully that is certainly our vision, to give customers the tools to give their team the tools to take more responsibility back on.
And do you find that's a differentiator for you as a small consultancy? Is that fair?
I think so. I think for us, we don't have the facilities to outsource things, being frank, but I think it's also, we like to empower teams internally, and I think that's one of the greatest things around automation and orchestration. Once you get your house in order, you can bring that capability back in-house. And we're a big, we would encourage that, because I think we see some of the frustrations when you outsource those services. It is extremely frustrating. And at the rate in which networks are changing and things like that, if you can bring the tool sets back in-house, we'd certainly do that. And I also enjoy sleeping at night, so 24/7 managed service on these networks. We could try and split the roles and responsibilities up, but certainly we want to leave customers better off and leave them with the tools and the skill set and the know-how.
I've got one other question for you, Abba, about cloud. I don't know what your cloud uptake looks like and where you're going with that. Is that a big part of your environment now?
It is, but traditionally, being a law firm, lots of our clients that we deal with, lots of private capital clients, they typically didn't like their data in the cloud.
Sure.
But of course, you have those conversations with them, and they're like, okay, where does your email sit? Oh, it's in Office 365. So, okay, so gradually, there's more maturity around our clients and their appetite of moving stuff in the cloud. We, as a law firm, have struggled with legal vendors that haven't really taken up what the public vendors have done with cloud. So it's been an arms race to see which legal vendors replicate their services in the cloud. So, but ultimately, rather than infrastructure in the cloud, we've looked at the best of breed SaaS services in the cloud.
Sure.
So obviously, like many organizations, assurance around some of the cloud platforms that we use is hugely important. And the appetite for our users to have downtime is it's the more uptime you give them, the appetite for downtime becomes more crucial. So.
And I guess having a good understanding of the cloud environment as a network, because ultimately this is someone else's network, right? But that's got to help, having it as all part of one visibility platform, I suppose.
And that's the problem. So many technology vendors out there. There's lots of dashboards. There's lots of complications. But having one central system where you can monitor exactly what's going on across your network, cloud to on-premise, to your SaaS services, is highly beneficial. And I can see us in the next couple of years really broadcasting our capability around how we monitor everything across our cloud and on-premise environments.
Awesome, thank you. Any other thoughts while I dwell on the cloud side of things there, Campbell?
No, the only thing that we typically see is that cloud kind of raced ahead in terms of the DevOps functions, the infrastructure as code and things like that. And that what we're trying to do, and especially with IP Fabric, bring all of that back into the same team. So, even within CRS, there's Ansible modules running, doing all sorts of different things, but that appetite isn't necessarily on the networking team. So trying to spread that across multiple teams, have the same appetite for more automation, for more infrastructure as code, spreading the tool sets, making things more consumable. So I think we've seen cloud, that's quite normal nowadays, to spin things up very quickly in cloud, but then the same appetite isn't there when you're deploying a site from a networking perspective. So I think that's where we see the two worlds coming together quite nicely.
Being able to treat them as one.
Exactly, and they, not should be one, because some big businesses have carved them out for a reason. But I think in smaller, mid-sized clients, it is one team necessarily. And I think bringing that visibility and capability into one platform does make life a lot easier. Because I think when you start troubleshooting cloud networking, it's a long day at the office for some people.
Long day for someone, anyway. But, Well, I've just got a couple of takeaways I want to go through. If you see anything on the list here, just shout, and we'll see if we can shed some light on it. So the things I'm hearing is obviously we want to be able to manage complexity. That's the key here. You've got lots of different technologies, lots of different parts of the network, lots of different levels of existing support and different tooling and whatever that you're using to do that. So it's all about bringing it together and being able to manage it as one. So I think that's super important. Like I say, just shout if you disagree. The second thing here is the fact that we're dealing with knowledge about the network and not just data. It's great having the data points about individual devices and individual interfaces, but you've got to have the context. I think you mentioned having the context there. So I think that's obviously super important. And then, of course, that all has to be consumable by whoever needs it. So that might be the network engineer who needs that instant representation of the data as documentation, because that's what makes sense to them. But it might also be your higher ups who want the reporting on your compliance or whatever. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, guys. That was great. I just wanted to run through those points. If anyone's interested in learning out any more, there's a couple of QR codes there to point you to some websites. IP Fabric are at booth C12, right in the middle of the world of solutions. You can't really miss us. So if you want to pop over and have a chat with any of us, feel free. Otherwise, unless there are any questions, that's us. But I don't think there are any questions. We have a question from the gentleman in the corner.
Do you think all network documentation is dead? Really?
What a great question. I guess network documentation for the sake of operations, I would say, is dead, because the point here is that you're replacing the need for it with a tool that can give you that same visualization, but actually a potentially more meaningful visualization. So I think that's important. Go on.
I think you're not doing it justice with the answer, but
go on.
From the end customer's perspective, what we've noticed regarding the platform that you guys have implemented for us is there's a snapshot. So depending on how far you set up the system to take logs of all of your network infrastructure. There's a snapshot of points in time where you can go back and see how was your network configured 6 months ago. So why that's beneficial, one, from a historical point of view, is if you had an incident, for example, touch wood, none of you do, but you can essentially go back and see what version of code you had on your network devices, what open ports you had. So from that perspective, historical perspective is good, but also while we talk about complicated nature of multiple vendors, documentation, being able to, within 20, 30 seconds, create a full network diagram of your entire infrastructure to give to a new vendor that you want to integrate, that essentially is very, very beneficial.
Or to onboard new staff, I guess. But
yeah, I think it's I don't think traditional, it's the approach to documentation, I think, is data, because sometimes we see it where we get a request to export one of the diagrams, and the key question is, what are you going to do with that? And they go, it's going straight back into Visio, and I'm going straight back into my traditional way of looking at documentation, and you've just undone all the hard work of putting in a far more dynamic solution. And I think it's changing that approach to what is documentation, and some documentation's better than none, and there's nothing worse than walking into a customer environment and you go, right, give us an overview, show us your documentation. And they go, what documentation? We hate documentation. And you go, well, we love it because we're trying to solve your problem, so let's meet you halfway, and why don't we put a tool in here that will take some of the burden away. But I think that approach to, if anyone does like documentation, please put your hand up and I can put you in touch with Millen, who loves documentation. But I think for us it is that approach in trying not to have those static documents, trying to have point-in-time references, the ease to go to the snapshot and see what actually happened in great detail. And then you can always build on it, and I think I mentioned that very briefly with the Open API. You can do a lot in terms of your own documentation. So what IP Fabric might produce might not be perfect for your business, but the ability to augment that and do what you want with it, if you understand how to use the API, I think that can complement whatever documentation process you have even. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's dead, but it certainly gives you a fresh approach to better documentation and a much more dynamic approach.
I can't ask for a more complete answer than that, I think. So thank you for the question. Well, that looks like it. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming to speak to us. And if you want to see more, come over to booth C12. Thank you.
Thank you.